So anyone who goes to Kenny and Ziggy's, they're going to be confronted with the most like it's like this most delightful man who has mastered customer service. So I welcome you, Chris, to the Dana Tyson podcast. How did you learn how to be the hostess with the mostest?
I don't know that I've learned that. I've kind of I learned every day from meeting also nice people,
Uh-huh.
and I will say that without a doubt, I got to give Mr. Caraba his definitely due just because I worked at Carrabba's on Kirby back in the day, and they Miss Rosie and those groups of people definitely had a sense of wanting to tell you how to help people and then getting an interest in people because a lot of times in the business you can kind of start thinking of people as numbers and not as people, and they showed you how to look at people as people, and it makes a big difference, especially when you're kind of vested with meeting people and knowing things about them. It's kind of like reading a book almost, if you will.
Right, but how did you what did they teach you? Because, you can just you can sense a certain I mean, there's a genuineness to you like you feed the soul of someone. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, I mean, one particular thing is they definitely made it about finding out about people. I
Okay.
mean, if people are interesting, right, and if given an opportunity, they can be very interesting. And like I say, like a good book, you start to see things about people, and you, I don't know, it's just you start to want to help people. It's kind of like I guess like anything they say, like when you give, you get a good feeling, and so it kind of just you learn to do those things. It's like wanting to help people out. Um,
I
and I
don't know
mean,
if you're
just
born that way or if it's a technique that you have mastered. So I want to go through the process because, they say the number one thing people fear the most is public speaking.
okay.
All right. So you're in close quarters with people. You've got to get their orders out. You want to make sure. I mean, Kenny and Ziggy can be really crazy during lunchtime. I met Chris at the one on, his big new location in the Galleria area. And right off the bat, like you don't even know if you had a tough night or a horrible morning. You are full on in customer service, like genuine customer service mode.
I most restaurants try to talk to you about being on stage when you walk into the door, which is
Right.
something that you have to take into consideration every time you walk in the door. Is that it's the job is to be like an actor and to be on stage because people are watching you, and so they talk about that all the time and making sure that you're doing those things that people would want to see if you go on stage. Like if you're watching again, if you're watching a good book, the details are the devil are in the details. So that's something that you kind of look forward to try to see, well, what's gonna be with this book at this time, because I mean you need great people like your son, who and his friends, and you find out about different things that I personally wouldn't have even had an opportunity to be part of if I didn't have these people that come in and are able to bring something special to me as much as I if I'm bringing something to them. So that's always a great delight too.
It's a lot of people come to Kenny and Ziggy's and have maybe they do their weekly meeting, maybe a motivational meeting. And that's what you're talking about, Bobby and his buddies. They're in real estate and they love to come to that location. And I know Mattress Mac when he comes up to speak at iHeartRadio, he goes to Kenny and Ziggy's and has an amazing breakfast and probably an incredible experience with you as well.
Well, yes, I hate to say it like this, and I've been thinking about this all night. There's a little bit of a selfishness to it too, because again, um, when you give something to somebody and they genuinely enjoy it, you get kind of a rush or a high, if you will.
Yes.
And so there's a little bit of that because when you have people who are appreciative of what you do, um, it's a very um spiritual, I think.
Yeah,
It's the only way I could really kind of put it as, because you get to there's people who come in and they have a bad day, and sometimes talking to them, they change their whole day. Or
right.
sometimes people come in, I have a bad day, and people bring something. They're like they see me every week and they're like, hey, what's going on with you today? And so, I mean, some of it's a little selfishness too. So I will admit that.
Mac always says the essence of living is giving.
Okay.
And I mean, that just covers everything, right? It really does.
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
amazing. What would you say, Chris, to people who might be shy, or say they're going to a party, a social event, or they've got to be sitting at a restaurant and they've been seated next to someone they don't know? What's a great icebreaker? What have you learned to kind of get the conversation started? You've got to have this mastered.
You know, I would think that the age old thing is, hey, how you doing? I mean, that's to me the biggest icebreaker of anything, because people are either going to tell you in 2 seconds horrible, or they're going to tell you doing great, or they look at you kind of like they didn't hear you. Like that, you get three responses: either they didn't hear you, like huh, like they don't expect you to say, hey, how you doing, or they're like horrible, or they're like, hey, it's great, thanks for asking. So, hey, how you doing is always my just going, hey, how you doing? And so that's always it seems to me it would be a great thing.
When you're learning about each person, each book, are there certain areas that you go to that seem to be successful? Have you been burned with kind of going in certain other areas? How do you approach it where you're very diplomatic and yet you're still learning?
So I think, like with anything, it comes with practice.
Yeah.
And when you've done things, when you do things almost all the time, it becomes certain level of second nature. And I've been in the restaurant business for 20 years. And then you got somebody like, for example, Kenny and Ziggy, who've been in the restaurant business like their whole lives. They if you've ever been in when like Ziggy comes in, he's you know just as anytime you see him, he'll walk to everybody. He'll say hello. He says, "How you doing?" And so when you have a boss that comes in and is that way, it kind of starts from the top up and then comes to the bottom. You're like, well, I have to be that and just as much more if that's what that person's bringing. Because I've worked for some bad bosses, and their your energy isn't as high when they come in to want to speak to people and or find out about people. And I think it translates because people sometimes, and I hope this isn't kind of changing it, but sometimes even if I don't have a good read on somebody, I can bring Ziggy over to them, and that moment instantly changes because they're like, oh well, the owner's taking this a moment to say hello to me, I've been guilty on capitalizing that on more than an occasion or two.
Very smart strategy, though. Very smart strategy. I've been reading this book, and gosh darn it, Chris, wish I remembered the name. It's the founder of the Shake Shack. And the
Okay.
Shake Shack all over Houston now, but it was just a little Shake Shack at Saratoga Springs Horse Park. And his whole goal was going beyond delighting his customers. I mean, he was like, if he found out a couple was having an anniversary and the wife is like stressed out that she left the champagne in the freezer and she's like to the waiter, is it going to explode? You know what he does? Give me the keys to your home. I'm going to go there and I'll get it out of the freezer. And he left like flowers and a gift card. I mean, that was extraordinary customer service.
So the gentleman you're talking about is Danny Myers. He
Yes,
wrote a
yes,
book
yes,
called Setting the Table.
yes.
And Setting the Table is a book where he goes into about how he remembers his first things as far as like the restaurant business, food, and then service. And he found out that again, I consider it kind of a little bit of a selfishness that when you provide people with these, and if I can't remember if it's a quote from that book or if it's a quote from another book, but it's a statement that says people don't remember what you did for them, but they remember how you made them feel.
Feel.
And
Yes.
if you leave them feeling good about whatever you've done, that's one of the things that they're working towards in that, if I remember correctly, in that book. And so he really set the stage, and he talks about, again, being on stage whenever you're dealing with the massive crowds that you may deal with, that you just kind of always have to let you know that people are looking at you, and sometimes even looking up to you. I mean, it's, again, I know I keep saying this is kind of a selfishness, but for someone who doesn't have a degree, and doctors, lawyers, people who are dignitaries are asking me, so what do you think about this dish? And they're looking for me to give them a response. And in a you know, depending on what the environment is, because some people are, it's a strictly business, and they need to be, hey, I need this, and then to be left alone. And there's some people who wants, well, I've got this dietary restriction, knowing the ingredients of what it is that might have to be in the ingredients, especially when in this particular case, we're a kosher style deli, and people some people don't even know that what's the difference between kosher and not kosher. And then when you can
Right?
sit there and say, well, we're technically not kosher, so some of the things that we have to know, so that when those people say, oh, so I can't order da 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 da, or like you have a gluten allergy, knowing, okay, well, you can't get this, but we do have these alternatives. So there's a lot of having to know those things to come with that as well.
Which makes the customer feel so taken care of and so relieved that you cared enough to know these things so I can feel comfortable in coming back to you all because Kenny and Ziggy's knows my needs.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? I know
Absolutely.
it's so true. The presence of you. There's a lady that out in I live in the Belleville area, and there's a place called 22 North Holland, and Chef Cody got his training in Vermont, which is where I'm from. So I feel this connection to him, and I'm like, now we're in Belleville together. But his girlfriend, who is the lead hostess, Laura, she just has such a way. They wouldn't even have to serve food. You just want to go just to get a hug from Laura. I mean, that's the power that a person, you are entertaining us. You've got the amazing food and drink, and then the people that make up the restaurant. It's so important. I don't know if the food and drink could do it alone.
Well, to be honest with you, I know it wouldn't, because I know of many. I mean, if it were just food alone, we wouldn't have things like Yelp and these open
True.
table meetings where people will say, "Hey, great food, bad service. I'm never going back there." I
Yep.
mean, you never hear the reverse. You always say, the food's not that good, but the service is great. I'll give them a second chance. So, and some people especially in today's society, forget that those things are what sets them apart from one place or another. Is, hey, you know, you can go to a particular fast food restaurant. I don't want to really put out names, but when you go in through their drive-through, and you can get in 2 to 3 minutes, and you always know that no matter what happens, they have somebody out there with their little reader outside, and you can move fast, and it's going to be,
I know who
it's
you're
a
talking
line of,
about.
it's 30 people in line, but for some reason they get you in and out in 6 minutes. You go to other restaurant concepts, and there's one person there, and you're there for 15 minutes. And it's that same kind of feeling that you have, if when you come into these places and they don't give you a good sense of humor. It's like, oh man, I'm here for lunch. I'm already anxious because I got to get back from lunch.
Yep.
My
Yep.
boss has been on me. I would like somebody to not come up here and not be like, "Hey, can I help you? Help you? What's somebody? Hey, how's it going? Can I bring you a Dr. Brown's, a little black cherry or something like that?" Or maybe even like now we have a bar. If people come in there, we have a bar, and people can come in and have a mimosa, have a maybe a Bloody Mary, take some of the edge off when they're having the meeting.
Right,
So
right. I
you
I
want to have
just
people that are
I
kind of
have
like
to say,
yourself.
the place that you're talking about, I know the lady who was responsible, her marketing company was responsible for bringing that place to Houston. Her name is Tina,
Yeah,
and her philosophy is, I want you to leave here feeling better than when you came in. Just
beautiful.
like you said, it's the same feeling. And it's just that if the world was able to capture that, and we all did that, can you even imagine? No road rage, We wouldn't be quitting jobs. I mean, it would just be amazing.
Yeah, it would be. It would be, and I think that there are places that capture that, and we, I think people gravitate to those places that they feel that way, and those places
Yes.
tend to be fairly more successful than others.
Sometimes you don't realize it though. So when you verbalize it, you know what? Every time I leave Kenny and Ziggy's, I feel better than when I went in. I didn't even notice that. It's just like I always felt good. And maybe
Yeah.
it's because Chris met you at the door and tried to make your morning or your lunchtime or your afternoon a delight. And the food, I don't even know how you can go to work every day and not just eat everything.
Well, I mean, I'm address the food thing, but isn't that the same reason that your listeners tune into you every day or listen to your podcast? Because you make them feel a little bit better about anything or everything that's going on.
On
And
our
I mean,
Fridays, we even call it a feel good Friday.
yeah.
So you think, okay, it's Friday, which you're kind of excited about Friday already, right? But you still have the boss and stuff that you have to deal with and the kids. So we try to share a story that made you feel good. And then that you don't even realize like people will be driving, Chris, and they'll smile. They could be alone in the car. And I'm like, that's my goal. That if they were to put a mirror in front of themselves, they'd be smiling because of what that caller just said.
So then, if I may, what has prompted you to be able to do that the same way you asked me? Because is that something that you learned, or is that something that was in you?
Isn't that see, I've never had that question asked to me. I do know that, oh, and I've been at Sunny for, you've been in the food in waiting or just in the business for 20 years?
That well, I've been in probably customer service all my life, but in the
All your
restaurant
life.
business for 20 years because
Okay.
I sold cars at one point in time, did customer service on phones for one at one point in time.
So
But
you're interacting with people. I've been at Sunny for 30, almost 34 years.
and so you graduated, you did that as soon as you got out of the crib. You just kind of started walking, and you were
Yep.
like,
I just walked into Sunny as a little girl. And, and I'll tell you, I think I have a helpaholic personality.
okay,
I just like to help people. I was going to say that you've got this humility. We have got listeners, and it's just the craziest thing, Chris, who are the kindest people that I wish I could be them. So that's just a gift given to me by God that we have the I guess it's the Sunny format that attracts incredible people. Now, if there's someone having a bad day, this is what I was taught. And you know who taught this and kind of confirmed it for me? I may have been taught it years ago. I MC the HPD cadet graduations.
okay,
Troy Finner is the HPD. He's the top cop. He's the chief. He's also been there 33 years.
okay,
He tells the cadets, you are going to meet people on the worst day of their lives. They're not calling you to say, hey, come on over for a cup of coffee. They're calling you because there's distress.
right,
I want you to give them dignity. And when I was like, what? Like when you think of that concept, so then I might have an angry listener who's simply having a bad day. And so I don't get offended. I used to. And I go, you know what, let's back up a little bit. And I try to just try to connect with them where they are. And I always apologize if I offended someone, always, because it's live. You sometimes say really stupid things, you know?
yeah,
And I did this, I did this learning from being on the radio. You know, when you go and you pay for someone's coffee in the line?
yeah,
Okay. If that doesn't make you feel so good, you have no idea if they're going, oh my God, I can't believe, that that person just because I know it happened to me once. And I thought, that is so freaking nice. Why can't I be that nice?
right.
There was a person who I would always try to leave. Every Sunday morning I did it at Starbucks. I'd always try to leave. And this
What's that?
one person chased me down to say thank you. So you do these things, and I think it just continues to grow. And then you do it, and then you feel good, and then you do it, and you see what it makes other people feel good. And you're like, it's like a little pebble, it just makes life so much nicer. And then you don't even know that you're bummed out about something. And it gives you this joy to get through the day, maybe the weekend, maybe the entire week. And then you have an opportunity to do it again. And it's just an amazing it's an amazing, I don't even dynamic, I guess you would call it.
Yes, ma'am. Now, let me ask you this, because you said you've been on the radio for 33 years and dealing with
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
in those scenarios. Can you recall like a time that you just know that you just someone came in and you just were able to change their mood from like a, I don't want to say a bad, but maybe say they were maybe down or something, and and you were able to like, you know what? Let me just, whether it was saying a prayer or maybe you played a song or maybe you just mentioned something that happened to change their way. Because like sometimes, like for example, people will come in and you hear them and they're down a little bit, and you know Ziggy's kind enough to let us be able to take certain liberties. So for example, I've had people who were kind of upset, maybe had a passing or something like that, and I'm a lot of the idea. I'll bring them over a dessert, and you can see just their whole like, even though they may still be sad, you know, they're just like, thank you for noticing. And I was just wondering if there's a moment in your mind that may stick out that you could say you could just, you've changed somebody, and you weren't necessarily meaning to, but you were just trying to help out, and it's like, wow, you know,
I'll
I'm
tell
glad.
you what I did this. I've done this several times. There was a lady who called in. She just found out that her husband had terminal cancer. And she's a longtime listener. She just would call in all the time. And then for whatever reason, she just called me this day. And I was like, okay. And this is when Katie was, this was years ago. And Katie was
Okay.
like, Kingsland Boulevard was Katie. And then Pin Oak Boulevard. And she goes, well, I'm out on Pin Oak. I'm going, oh my God, that's like far out in the middle of nowhere. Her husband loves Jack in the Box. So I
Okay.
said, I will bring it because he listens all the time too. So I got them Jack in the Box for lunch. I brought the little bag of Jack in the Box to their home and we lay in his bed and watched movies eating Jack. I had never had Jack in the Box. And we're laying in the, and I'm going, this is crazy. But it was just like a human to human connection. And it was beautiful. And it was just beautiful.
You know, I'm so glad you used that term, human connection, because especially nowadays, we
Oh,
tend to forget about the human
yeah,
connection.
yeah.
You know, you get so wrapped up into to this, and
I
sometimes
know.
it's easy to forget that it is somebody that's emotionally going through whatever they may be going through that day. And I think that the toughest thing to try to break through is that, especially as we've gotten older, we put up these walls sometimes, and so we tend to think that if someone's taking an interest on us, it's for a negative impact. And even though you may have a good intention, sometimes your good intention can be um, misconceived, and then you have to really say, "No, I'm just want to know you're okay," and so having that human connection and seeing that that person has an a I guess the best way to say is a need to have somebody to be that just takes a moment to care for them,
Yeah.
you know,
Yep.
is
Yep.
missing in a lot of things, you know, and that's
Loneliness.
again, yes, and that's again one of the
Loneliness.
reasons why I still stay in this business too, is because I this I know I keep referencing to books, but I've seen people grow up from kids to adults, and so and you see them um, do these different things. Like I've worked for Kenny and Ziggy's for 7 years, and I have a particular family that I've seen their son from when he was born till he's like 7 now. And you know, he runs up and gives me a hug, and you know, that's another like
It's
warm
Uncle
feeling.
Chris.
Exactly. So I don't have kids of my own, but I mean, I have these types of moments. I mean, seeing your grandkids come in with your son a couple of times and just are adorable to see him. And can I just say this? Just your grandkids to your son are such a tall tale of the person that you are, because your son shines exactly the same way you do. You know, he's always just comes in and he's you know, very just a joy to be around, and sitting here talking to you for as long as I have now, you see where he gets that from, you know. So and then seeing how he even talks to his kids, it's like, hey, trying to teach them. And so when you get to see those kinds of things, it really brings in an opportunity to remember that, hey, you know what? We are human beings trying to do human
Right.
things every day. We have a struggle, but we're more alike than we are unalike, and sometimes it's easy to forget that, because you get news going on about that war and this war over there, and it's like
Horrible.
you still
It's like
gotta.
kindness and generosity. And
Yeah.
that book that you had mentioned, I mean, that man is like to the extreme of listening to people and delighting people. And generosity doesn't have to be money, monetary. It could be just your time. And I think that's probably the most valuable, just to stop. And I have a hard time just stopping and listening. And when you come into the room, I think so many people, I know I experienced that when I first met you, Chris. I just was like, wow, you, you, you are a human connector here.
Oh,
You
stop
are
it.
special. It was just, I just thought, why wouldn't Kenny and Ziggy's want you to you just are a big hug. You're just a big hug for people.
I appreciate that.
So, and I think that's what can you imagine to be, it's funny, our promotions director, Melissa Bresner, she just resigned after 33 years. Do you know
Oh,
what
wow.
her job was? You don't even know her. No one knows her. She's behind the scenes. You know what her job was? All the amazing prizes we give away, she curated them.
Okay.
She's responsible for bringing experiences, lifelong memories to families. And that's what I told her. I said, Melissa, do you realize, like, you give me Blake Shelton tickets for opening night at the rodeo? I get to give them to this precious little girl who wanted them so badly. I even
Okay.
had her parents on my podcast. That's all they were talking. Think about a family in the car driving to school. Okay, okay, Dana's got the Blake Shelton tickets ready. It's our nearly impossible question. Melissa got them. She has to go through all the channels to get these prizes that I'm blessed to give away. That's when I go, man, that's a cool job. But someone behind the scenes was making that happen. Like you, you're bringing out this amazing food that I'm going to love so much. The salmon on the bagel. Someone prepared that in the kitchen. I don't know who they are.
But if you knew the steps that it took for them to get that salmon
Right?
correctly, that is it's a tedious job. It There's a guy, and he has to have a very sharp knife. He has a piece of salmon, this large, so probably 12 to 15 inches, that he painstakingly has to just keep a very even hand and just literally go back and forth, slicing each piece all the way to the end. And then he has to eyeball each one of those pieces to take off any imperfections on that, because it is a
Wow.
piece of meat. And then he has to put that in the wrapping paper without messing that up, and then be able to he has to store it long enough for it to be put onto the sandwich. That it is a pretty painstaking. So, like you say, the people who are behind the scenes are the people who make things like us shine as well. Because again,
Right.
even though I may have said like service is what brings people back, people do want good food. And when you have a product that is representation of that, and you have someone that presents that, like yourself, giving that the young lady the Blake Shelton tickets, and then having someone behind the scenes that was able to get those tickets. Because
Right.
again, that wasn't an easy thing to do, and I mean, it doesn't matter how many connections you have. Sometimes you have to jump through some hoops to
Yeah,
get to those
yeah.
things.
That's
And
what
so,
people I think need to realize, that there's so many people making this all work. So if you're going to be short-tempered, impatient, it's kind of like, no, I choose to not. I did a story on this woman. She was a Deer Park. I can't remember which school district. Her name is Sherry Sherry Moody. Sherry Moody. So she's
okay,
this lady. You probably saw her in the news. I didn't know she was local. She's the
okay,
woman who got sick, went to the emergency room for dehydration, got sepsis, wakes up, all her limbs had to be removed to keep her alive. She
okay,
wakes up with a smile. I am so glad I'm alive to be with my husband and my kids. She's got Sherry Moody on Facebook, her daily progress. She has no hands, no feet. And she makes sure she's got her sister and all her friends and her husband. She posts pictures of her beautifully dressed, exercising, whatever it takes to show you I have chosen hope and happiness. I will not go down that pit. That's amazing, right?
Very
All
much so.
choices. It's all choices. So if that doesn't make, if you're having a crappy day, Chris, if that doesn't make you go, what the heck am I worried about, right? I've got this amazing job. And I think so many of us could just say, I've got this amazing job, even if you don't have a job or if you've lost your job. What next? What do you want me to do next?
That's a big question, and I mean,
Right?
well, yeah, and people like that are again, um, I think they like you pointed out is are definitely motivators because you're like if that person can do it, I don't have a reason, or even if I do, I need to change my attitude about what I'm thinking about,
Exactly.
and
We need people like that.
it, you know, and if you'd want to ask that young lady because again, like you said, she came out and she was still able to say, you know what, this is a blessing. It might not be the blessing I asked for, but it's a blessing. And understanding that, without getting any type of religious, that sometimes they say that your God doesn't give you anything that you can't handle.
Right?
And
A
sometimes when
lot of
we're
people
going
hate
through
that.
these things, we don't exactly when we're going through those things, those words aren't that
I know.
comforting.
I know.
But when you come out on the other side of it and you look back on either what you've learned from it or the strength that you developed it to go into the next situation, um, it's real. It's really easy to forget. Muscle is built by pressure,
Yeah.
and someone like her is unfortunate as that happened. Being able to be someone that we can look at and say, you know what, I have to do it because if that person can stay happy, I have to.
She
And
glows. She literally glows. You need to check on her. And Chris, I'm telling you, you need to next time we talk, I want you to tell me that you started writing your book. Okay?
well, okay, so um, I don't know if I necessarily want to write a book, but I would like to try to figure out a nonprofit situation because I would love to try to go through and help kids learn for how to build their future. Well, I guess that is a book, so I guess that is. I guess you're right.
You know what you
Um,
do? You
it's-
start out doing, Bobby, who you appreciate, is constantly sending me videos of motivational, incredible concepts that people have learned through pressure, which
mhm.
led them to success. That might be an area that you might want to start doing. Like you put together these concepts that you've learned, simple concepts that you've learned in dealing with people from all walks of life in the restaurant industry. And, Houston being the town that we're a foodie town. We
Yeah,
love talking food. And part of the experience is you serving us the food and you could share, oh my gosh, Chris, you could share so many stories and bits of mattress macisms because that's what he does. You know what he does? He's at that store calling his customers from the previous day to find out what their experience was like. That's what he does.
Matrix Max is to me the hometown hero, along with JJ Watts, because I will never forget that when we had that storm, he so graciously opened up his stores and said, "If you don't
Yeah.
have a place to stay, you come stay here."
Yep.
I mean, and he's another person that when he comes in, I hate to say this like this, but I still get boys' schools crush on him because again, for someone to do that, and I mean, this guy, I mean, come on, he's got everything for him to say, I don't care about that. You people need help. Let me help you.
Yeah. I've seen him
You
do
know,
it. It's true. It's true.
so
Well,
I just
I tell my viewers right now, if you first of all, Kenny and Ziggy's is amazing, and the piece of chocolate cake is it's like the size of your body, so you can split it.
yes,
But
sir.
go in and learn about an incredible experience with Chris and everyone there. And I just had to pick your brain. I needed you to encourage me and inspire me so I can go another 33 years bringing good customer service to our listeners like you do to the patrons at Kenny and Ziggy.
Well, you've already got the most important thing. Part of that is the big bright smile. So that's that helps. It just and it comes through. So I mean, I thank you for taking the time to talk to little old me
To pick
and
your brain. It's not little, it's that humility. I'm telling you what, it's that humility. You're just a delight. And I thank you for all you do. I always like talking to people who delight our community. And that's exactly what you do. Keep it up. We see you, we're watching you, and we appreciate you, Chris.
well, thank you. I appreciate it. And thank everybody who's made that possible. And again, I do. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
It's my
I really do.
pleasure. We'll see you soon.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.